On this Wednesday night, BC declares a state of emergency.
We had more rain in 2 days than we normally get in an entire November.
Fears a critical pumping station could fail. The people defying Merritt's evacuation order, and the lake's farmers are going to try to save their livestock. The added strain on the supply chain.
What if we run out of medication?
New difficulties getting goods in and out of BC. Attention cross-border shoppers and day trippers when PCR tests will likely be scrapped for short visits to the U.S.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. A state of emergency has now been declared in BC as thousands of people remain displaced from their homes and communities cut off by catastrophic flooding. The power of the water driven by climate change has devastated lives and wiped out critical infrastructure. The federal government is now sending the military in to assist with evacuations and the supply chain chaos as BC deals with disasters on multiple fronts. Premier John Horgan says the state of emergency is needed to help everyone get access to water, food, and shelter.
The order will preserve basic access to services and supplies for communities across the province. We will bring in travel restrictions and ensure that transportation of essential goods and medical and emergency services are able to reach the communities that need them.
Here are some of the worst hit places. In Abbotsford, 75 kilometers southeast of Vancouver, more than 180 people were rescued by air and water overnight. There is fear a critical pumping station could fail, putting more people and hundreds of farms at risk. Hundreds of animals have already died.
Over the last 2 days, I've been able to have FaceTime discussions with farmers, and some of them are in their barns. And some of their barns are flooded, and you can see the animals that are deceased, and it's heartbreaking.
Northeast of there, the city of Merritt is still a no-go zone. The floodwater is dropping, but the water and sanitation systems have failed, and it will be some time before they're repaired. And near Lillooet, the search continues for those missing since a mudslide swept vehicles off Highway 99, 3 hours north of Vancouver. Police have recovered the body of one woman. There is lots to get to tonight. Our coverage begins with Robin Gill in Abbotsford.
When their livelihoods are at risk, farmers are willing to risk their lives to save their animals, not leaving until as many as possible are safe. Thousands of animals have already died. Others will have to be put down.
Yeah, we moved 150 cows yesterday out.
John Seatsma knew he had to step in to help his neighbors.
The worst year for farming. We went from drought to high water to this, like the hands down the worst year for farming.
The flooding has forced hundreds of people in Abbotsford, BC from their homes. Some airlifted out, others left to get out on their own.
I had to go the back way and around barriers, and I had to leave my ID with a police officer, and I had half an hour to get in, get my stuff, and get out again. We were literally just throwing stuff because we don't know for how long.
This part of Abbotsford is known as Sumas Prairie, the hub of British Columbia's agriculture sector. But these once bucolic fields are now underwater. Two rivers, the Fraser in British Columbia and the Nooksack in Washington state, are putting pressure on the city's pump station. Protected by sandbagging efforts stretching late into the night. It can pump over 500,000 gallons of water, but that's meant for only one river.
While the situation remains critical at this time, the Barrowtown pump station is operating at its full capacity, but was never intended or designed to take on water from another country.
All that farmland is under about 3.5 meters of water. There are sandbags around the pump station, but the city of Abbotsford is simply buying time. Tonight, a full moon is rising, and that could raise the tide of the rivers nearby.
The government of BC is declaring a state of emergency.
BC's premier, who's been undergoing cancer treatment, is addressing the emergency.
The last few days have been incredibly difficult for British Columbians as we've experienced yet another natural disaster.
Susan Gillis is relying on the kindness of strangers for now, not knowing when she can go home.
How are you coping in all of this? Poorly, but as best as I can, you know. I try to keep things calm for everyone else.
As for the farmers, they're working around the clock to try to save their animals.
For a bad situation, it turned out very well.
But not for every farm, and there's still so much uncertainty. Robin Gill, Global News, Abbotsford, BC.
There is still so much uncertainty. This is a dairy and poultry farm in Sumas Prairie. It's completely inundated, including the chicken barn and the milking barn. I spoke with Matt Dykeshorn, who runs the farm with his family. How many chickens did you lose, Matt?
Probably between 20 and 25,000.
That's half your barn?
Yeah.
And you sent us some pictures, or your sister did, I think, of some calves in the kitchen.
It was actually my barn office. That was literally the only dry place that I could put. I went out to check them Monday night at 9:30, and they were standing shoulder deep in water. I did not know how long the water would keep rising, so I threw them in the heated office, and they've been hanging out there ever since.
Well, it's got to be incredibly stressful for all these animals.
Oh, for sure. They have no idea what's going on. They're hungry. They're looking for a place to lay down. They're standing at the gate bawling at me, and which is a pretty helpless feeling because there's literally nothing I can do for them.
Well, Matt, I'm so sorry for everything you're going through. Thank you for taking us through what's happening to your farm. Rescuers are scouring a mudslide on Highway 99 between Pemberton and Lillooet for more victims. One woman has been confirmed dead, and today BC Premier John Horgan said more fatalities are expected. At least 2 other people have been reported missing. Logs, mud and damaged vehicles still litter the roadway. Crews clearing the debris say the pavement underneath appears to be intact. In south central BC and the city of Merritt, an evacuation order remains in place, though some people never left. Part of that city of 7,000 is still underwater, and RCMP have stepped up their patrols. Heather Yourex-West is at one of the police checkpoints. Heather, is there any timeline on when the evacuation order in Merritt might be lifted?
Well, Donna, we spoke with city officials today who say they're working as fast as they can, but it still could be another week before people here are allowed to return home. The problem, though, as you mentioned, there are hundreds of people who never left, and that, the city says, is making cleanup efforts more complicated.
Days after flooding forced the evacuation of an entire city, much of Merritt, BC remains underwater, though residents are anxious to return.
We have dogs and stuff, so it's a hotel doesn't work that good, and I just told them they had to let us back in, and they did.
Outside City Hall, evacuees like Joe Sales have come back to plead their case, hoping for a wristband that would allow them to pass through the RCMP checkpoints, limiting access to the city.
The city of Merritt is quiet, but it's not empty. Despite the evacuation order, officials estimate about 1,000 residents have decided to stay behind. They're living in a community without water, sewage, or access to groceries and other supplies.
We cannot bring citizens back as long as we have unsafe water and no access to our wastewater system. So that is our number one priority, is to ensure that the water is safe for our residents and that they can come home and flush toilets and use water.
With an evacuation order expected to remain in effect for at least a week, officials are asking all remaining residents to pack up and go. Across the Coldwater River, the city says accessing the neighborhood of Collettville is no longer safe.
We had to decide we weren't going to risk the lives of firefighters and ambulance crews by sending heavy vehicles over those bridges. As a result, anyone who is still in Collettville has no emergency services available to them.
But Collettville residents like Cal Jade are undeterred, determined to remain in the community as long as they can.
We've got camping gear that we're using, and because we're in a construction zone, there are portable toilets, porta potties. So people have been using those.
On Tuesday, a family who stayed behind had to be rescued from the air. The Lower Mainland's North Shore Rescue Crew says the family of 3 and their dog were brought to safety after flowing water surrounded their home. A reminder that for this community, the emergency is not over yet.
And with so many properties here unattended, evacuees have had some concerns that their homes could be targeted by thieves. That's why the city says that as of this morning, RCMP have doubled its presence here. They are patrolling the entire city, including that cutoff community of Collettville on the other side of the river. Donna?
Okay, Heather Yourex-West in Merritt, British Columbia, thanks. With so many highways washed out, thousands of people are stranded. More than 1,000 are stuck in Hope at the eastern end of the Fraser Valley, about 2 hours east of Vancouver. Global's Kamil Karamali is there tonight. Kamil, what are you hearing from people who have been stranded now since Monday?
Donna, a small and usually quiet airport packed with people today looking to pay thousands of dollars for private helicopters and small planes to take out of Hope. Right now, it's the only way out of the district. The desperation to leave partially due to the dwindling resources here, with both routes north on the Coquihalla and west on Highway 7 completely blocked. Some people have been hoarding goods and supplies, empty shelves at grocery stores, with some completely running out of eggs, milk, and bottled water. There are also concerns for people running out of medicine. Only a handful of pharmacies here, and they're running short on medication, limiting the number of doses they can give to people, while others have more complex medicinal needs and are desperately in need of access to pharmacies in Vancouver. We met one mother whose 5-month-old has a very rare heart condition and needs her supplies back in Coquitlam, or her son's health will deteriorate quickly.
His heart is unpredictable. I just need to be at home. Like, it's so hard to tell. Like, it could not happen. He could be totally fine, or it could happen tonight and we need to get out, and that's scary.
Now, those people who have been choosing to fly out of Hope have been leaving their cars abandoned here at the airport, but those who want to drive out of the district, well, they have not received any clear indication when that may be. It could be as long as weeks from now. Donna?
Kamil Karamali in Hope, British Columbia. The provincial government says getting highways repaired and open is one of its top priorities. Highway 7 west of Agassiz is now open to single-lane alternating traffic. In some other areas, the washouts are so extensive it could take months to repair. Officials say the best hope for restoring a key route soon is Highway 3. It snakes along the southern part of the province. The Coquihalla, the main connector and fastest route between Vancouver and Kelowna and Kamloops, is another story. The province says 5 sections of that highway are badly damaged. Some parts, including bridge sections, are snapped off and washed away. CN and CP rail lines are also washed out, and all of this is having a devastating effect on Canada's already fragile supply chain. The Port of Vancouver, the largest in Canada, is now cut off from the rest of the country. Abigail Bimman reports on how the impacts of the BC storm will soon be felt by the rest of the country.
I went in for a few things and realized there wasn't much of anything.
Hollowed out grocery store shelves like these in Kelowna, just one challenge. Everything hangs on how long it will take to rebuild rail and road.
I had a load of lumber was taken into Vancouver, but everything got closed, flooded out and everything, so we had to just turn around and come back.
Lumber loads may wait. Perishables cannot. Dairy farmers already told to dump milk, unable to be picked up.
On the supply side, the situation is quite catastrophic.
Sylvain Charlebois says food shortages will largely be felt within BC.
We could see shortages of butter in the area, yogurt, sour cream, ice cream in a few weeks from now, which would be unfortunate because it would be a few weeks before the holidays.
Then there's the larger supply chain issue, getting goods from BC out to the rest of the country and beyond, with no estimate on a fix to the rail system.
It's certainly been heavily damaged.
All rail service to the Port of Vancouver is down. That's Canada's biggest port, moving as much as 70% of container goods. For now, ships are anchored, waiting. But there's a capacity limit, which the Chamber of Shipping expects will soon be reached.
This is going to delay exports of Canadian commodities. It's going to delay parts coming in for manufacturing processes in other parts of Canada.
This is coming on top of the already existing supply chain challenges that have been created by COVID. So it's just sort of one thing after another.
Overall, impacts could include everything from getting prairie grain to Asia.
Canada is seen as a reliable supplier of food, and it's important we keep that reputation.
To getting goods of all kinds into Canada.
Consumer electronics for Christmas, anything you're thinking about that would have imports from the Pacific region, there are likely to be shortages and there are likely to be price increases for anything that does manage to get through.
Most pervasive is the uncertainty of it all, with no one, not Trans Mountain, nor CP, nor CN, yet saying exactly how long these repairs will take. It's impossible to know the extent of the impact. Donna?
Abigail Bimman in Ottawa, thanks. A change is coming for Canadians wanting to make a quick trip to the U.S. That's coming up after the break. A change is coming to the COVID-19 testing requirements for Canadians coming back into Canada from the United States. It's expected a PCR test will no longer be required for those who make short trips to the U.S. Border restrictions are among the issues Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is discussing on a trip to Washington. Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, is traveling with the Prime Minister.
Once Prime Minister Justin Trudeau touched down in America's capital, he, like every Canadian who comes here, requires a clean PCR test proving he doesn't have COVID before he can go home. It's one of the key restrictions Canada put in place when it reopened its border in the summer. Fully vaccinated Canadians can return to Canada without having to quarantine, but that pricey PCR test is required within 3 days of arriving at the border. That testing requirement, though, is seen as an unnecessary impediment to travel, and many here in the U.S. and back in Canada think it ought to be dropped.
But we really need to have the government follow the advice of their own expert panel immediately and remove the PCR requirement. Common sense requires it.
Well, it may soon be. Global News has learned that the government is set to announce, perhaps as early as Friday, that it will in fact drop the PCR test requirement, but only for fully vaccinated Canadians who have been gone less than 72 hours. So that's good for those who want to do some cross-border shopping or see a sporting event or a concert in the U.S. But the entry requirement is expected to remain for all foreign nationals, including Americans, and for Canadians out of the country longer than 3 days.
The question that the government will have to answer is, how are you safe in the 72nd hour and you become dangerous in the 73rd? What is the logic of this?
The Prime Minister of Canada.
Trudeau wouldn't say much about the new border rules.
We are looking at making steps to loosen up requirements while at the same time keeping Canadians safe.
But he did talk privately about them with congressional leaders like Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy, Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell. Other border management issues and rising U.S. protectionism were also on the agenda. On Thursday, the leaders will get down to business, and aides say they'll be looking to craft a North American strategy to deal with COVID and the economy, to deal with climate change, and to deal with China. Donna.
Okay, David Akin in Washington, D.C. Thanks. Queen Elizabeth back to her royal duties. That's coming up. One of the most recognizable rioters from the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol has been sentenced to 41 months in prison. Jacob Chansley stormed the building wearing a horned hat and face paint. He was among the first rioters to disrupt lawmakers meeting to certify President Joe Biden's election. He pleaded guilty to obstructing an official proceeding. He is among 650 people charged after the riot. Queen Elizabeth is back on her feet. Today she carried out her first in-person engagement in a month. She met with the head of Britain's armed forces, who is due to step down at the end of November. One of the Queen's beloved dogs was there too. The 95-year-old had been following doctors' orders to rest since spending a night in the hospital last month. On Sunday, she didn't attend the National Remembrance Service because the palace said she'd sprained her back. The Canadian men's soccer team celebrated their second goal against Mexico last night, Canadian style. They beat Mexico 2-1 in a pivotal World Cup qualifier. It was a nail-biting and exciting win on the road to the World Cup. And as Eric Sorensen reports, an historic night for Canadian soccer.
November in Edmonton, freezing temperatures, surrounded by snow. Welcome, Mexico. With an icy home field advantage, the Mexicans coping with the cold, Canada beat the 9th-ranked team in the world. Before a boisterous Edmonton crowd, the nation is being drawn to men's soccer like never before.
Atmosphere here in the stadium was electric. Yeah, it's something special. I haven't seen anything like this.
Canada had not even qualified to play in this tournament of the best Caribbean, North and Central American teams since 1998. Canada began the night in 3rd place. The win vaults this country over Mexico and the United States into first place for the first time. The top 3 go to next year's World Cup. Even the players seem surprised. Canada is top of the group.
If you said that at the beginning of the year, I would have said what group. Just because we're top right now doesn't mean anything to us. We still have so much more that we want to accomplish.
Superstar Alphonso Davies and others have led the team on the field, but a lot of credit goes to their English coach, John Herdman. 10 years ago, he helped build the Canadian women's team into one of the top programs, and 4 years ago took over the men's team, unifying the raw talent and fostering a new winning attitude.
They've built a foundation here that they'll fight and they'll work for each other. And when that's there, the talent comes out.
Obviously, having the star power helps, but that star power is now committed to helping the national team, and that's because of the environment that John Herdman has created.
As a sort of honorary Canadian now, these are some of the best moments of my life.
Canada had hoped to qualify for the 2026 World Cup that this country will co-host. But the team has blossomed so quickly, an unforeseen moment in Canadian sport may be at hand by next spring, a 2022 World Cup berth.
We keep pushing ourselves to get better and better.
Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Such a great game, and that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is one snowy, chilly day at Sturgeon Creek in Winnipeg. I remember it well. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.